All right, so we're going to look at gas diffusion, or more specifically, the properties that affect gas diffusion, that increase the rate of gas diffusion or decrease the rate of gas diffusion in respect specifically, I guess, to the circulatory system and the respiratory systems. Like what factors affect the flow of oxygen, right, into or out of the blood, and carbon dioxide into or out of the blood. The first one of these is surface area. Surface area is huge. You see it all over biology. So if we look specifically at the lungs, for example, right, you have, the trachea up top right here, and then the trachea is going to branch out into bronchus, and then the bronchus is going to sort of branch out into two, or well, it's actually more than two, but I don't know, that's plural, bronchioles. Sorry. Okay, and the successive branching here is to increase surface area. That's the whole goal. Your capillaries, where gas exchange occurs, does the exact same things. You branch and branch and branch to maximize surface area. The greater the area, the more that exchange can occur, and the more efficient your gas diffusion, right? In surface area, you should just be familiar with this, right? There's either for some sort of transfer or absorption. It's all over biology. For example, this I guess fungi have crazy networks of branching and stuff to increase the surface area because they absorb food that way. Plants absorb water with roots, and the roots are crazy branched to increase surface area. So just get used to the idea in biology that when you see increased surface area or branching, that's the goal. Either absorption's happening or transfer's happening. The last place, I guess, off the top of my head, is a small intestine. It has these things called villi and microvilli, and it's the exact same reason, right? We're trying to increase the surface area of the small intestine to absorb as much food as possible. So remember, surface area increases the rate of diffusion. If something happens in a problem, you're reading it, it's like patient A has some sort of disease, blah, 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 that's going to decrease some of this branching, right? Well, that means that you're going to decrease the gas diffusion, and that's bad. It's probably going to cause problems, all right? The next thing is concentration gradient. So I know a lot of people sort of remember that, okay, well, gases flow from sort of a high concentration to a low concentration. And you can memorize that, but it gets confusing, and sometimes it's helpful for students to understand why. Yeah, so if I have like 3 gas particles here, and they all kind of bump up against each other because they're gas particles and gases move and they collide with each other, those collisions next to each other are going to cause them to spread out. And so what you get, right, they spread out, they hit each other more, and they spread out even further. It's these collisions that cause gases to go from where there's a high concentration, meaning there's a lot of them in a small space, to a place where there's not so many in a small space and they're more scattered. Somebody walks in smelling terrible, you smell it immediately, and that's because the gas that comes off of him, right, sort of hits each other and bounces your way, right? I hope that makes sense. And that should help you to realize that gases flow high concentration to a low concentration. The greater the difference in concentration, the stronger the diffusion. So, for example, fish are in water. Yeah? Well, the concentration of oxygen in water is going to be lower than it is going to be in the air. Humans, right, we take our oxygen from the air. So it's actually easier for humans, or the gas diffusion is more efficient in humans than it is in fish. And that's why fish have developed this countercurrent exchange method, or they had to come up with a special way to sort of maximize diffusion, because it's harder since the difference between the concentration of sort of oxygen in their blood and oxygen in the water isn't as extreme as the difference in humans. So if you increase the difference in concentration gradients, you increase gas diffusion. All right, let's get rid of those. The last one is going to be distance, okay? So let's say that these are cells. They could be lung, they could be, tissue, and then here we have a capillary, right? So the goal of, oxygen is going to try to obviously get from, here, or let's say that, let's do carbon dioxide, since we've been talking a lot about oxygen. We have carbon dioxide. It's going to move from the tissue side, and its goal is to diffuse into the capillaries, right? So these are going to be body tissues. Producing lots of carbon dioxide, it goes inside. There's a space between these, and it's filled with interstitial fluid. Remember that the interstitial fluid is drained by the lymphatic system. If you haven't learned that, whatever, don't worry about it. right? But this diffusion occurs over a distance, yeah? So this is filled with fluid. If you get lots of fluid, if there's some, you hear a problem and it has some sort of buildup of fluid in here, well, that distance negatively affects gas diffusion. Blood's constantly flowing through here, and it's trying to pick up as much carbon dioxide as it can. If we increase this distance by increasing the amount of fluid here, we're going to get less efficient gas diffusion. Edema is going to be this buildup of interstitial fluid in the tissues, and edema affects gas exchange. It makes it harder for the oxygen to get to the tissues and for the carbon dioxide to get into the bloodstream. If you get pneumonia, fluid in the lungs, it's the same thing. That excess fluid increases or artificially increases the distance between point A and point B and decreases the efficiency with which you can exchange gases. Both of those situations are also bad, and your body has to struggle to find ways to compensate for that. Right? So remember, greater the concentration gradient, or the greater the difference in the concentration gradient between point A and point B of gases, the more efficient the diffusion. The more surface area you have, the more that you can get gases to diffuse, and the greater the distance, the lower the efficiency. So the shorter distance a gas has to travel, the easier or the quicker it's going to be able to diffuse. Right? Hope this all kind of makes sense.